All right, everybody. It looks like some people are still signing in, but my clock shows that we're right at 2 o'clock and we have a ton of fantastic information to cover. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome to this webinar. I'm so excited that you're here. We're going to cover some information on how you can expand your fundraising using really cool, really innovative earned income streams on top of a bunch of other topics. Nazarene is going to share some information with you, and you're also going to see how some real-life nonprofits and companies are putting some of these strategies into practice. Before we get started, just a little note about who I am. My name is Abby, and I'm part of the team over at QGive. We are an online fundraising platform that puts a lot of emphasis on helping nonprofits raise more money, and we understand that not all of your fundraising takes place online. So we are super stoked to have someone like Nazarene come in and teach us about how we can expand fundraising into other areas. I can see that a few of you on here are QGive clients. Hello, we're so glad you're here. If you're not a QGive client, totally fine. Everything we're going to learn here today applies to you too. And if you do have any questions about fundraising with QGive, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to get you in touch with the right person. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. We are recording the webinar, so either tomorrow or Monday, you're going to get an email from me with a copy of the webinar that you can watch. We'll have the slides available to you and links to any resources that Nazarene brings up today. If you want the slides right now, the slides are available in the little handouts area of your control panel, and you can download those today. If you have questions, feel free to shoot them over to me using the chat box that you have. We will use those for a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And if you are a Twitter user, you can go ahead and follow along with us using the QWebinar hashtag. And if you have a chance, go over to @WildWomenFund. That's Nazarene's Twitter feed, and it's full of good stuff. And you can always follow QGive as well. With all that out of the way, I want to go ahead and present our friend Nazarene. She is the brain behind Wild Woman Fundraising, and you also may have heard of some of the books she has published. She's got a ton of information to share with us today, and you guys are going to love it. You guys are going to absolutely love what we have to cover today. So, Nazarene, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Oh, Abby, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to QGive as well for allowing me to present to everybody today. I'm so grateful to you. I'm so grateful for everybody being here and everyone listening. Today is going to be simply a smorgasbord of options for you, and we're going to talk about what's really going on with our country and with our sector right now. So I'm really glad you're here. I was up late last night editing this presentation, making sure it was relevant for today in this very moment. And I'm really excited to be able to share this with you. Before we go too much further, I want to make sure we do the poll that we had, but this is just a little bit more about me. I'm the author of The Wild Woman's Guide to Fundraising, plus 10+ CFRE accredited e-courses on fundraising. I'm also an entrepreneur. I've gotten government contracts, and I'm definitely interested in leadership and mindset, and I've run my own nonprofit leadership summit online, and I love to help people take their nonprofits to the next level. So that's me, and the reason I'm holding a spear is because I believe that when you say wild, it means speaking your truth, even if your voice shakes. And so the spear is just a reminder that sometimes the truth can be hard and pointy, but we still need to face it. And when we do, it can become a source of strength and power for us. So with that said, here's what you're going to learn today: the latest giving trends, as well as the latest trends in our world. What is next level fundraising and earned income streams? A few case studies from the for-profit and the nonprofit world, people I've personally interviewed. A SWOT, if you don't already know what that is, we're going to talk about that today. If you do know what it is, don't worry, there's plenty more besides that. How to cut out what's not working, how to determine your needs, as well as look at your market, what makes you unique, how to try and refine things, hurdles to implementing, how to create systems, and how to get buy-in, as well as common misunderstandings about next level fundraising and earned income streams. So Abby, could we do the first poll before we get started on this giving trends piece? Who here is thinking about doing earned income right now, or who already has it?
All right, I launched this poll. Uh, let's see. Right now, people are pretty split between the three different options. Right now, it looks like an equal number of people are either thinking about it now or they're curious about what earned income is. Only 13% of people who are on the call said that they haven't actually really looked into it. So, guys, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. But thank you so much for responding. That makes everything a lot more fun. Let's
Great.
see. Now we should get, there you go.
Excellent. All right, everybody. So I'm so glad that most people here are either doing it already or thinking about it. I mean, obviously, you're here. And for those of us who aren't yet doing it, I'm going to give you a reason why you should, because the U.S. charitable deduction is changing. That means some people who are looking for the tax write-off are not going to give to us anymore. Also, the trend is that fewer people of modest means are giving. And I see that as a function of a lot of more GoFundMes happening for people's medical expenses and, you know, all the sorts of reasons people do the GoFundMes, funeral expenses, things like that. And then also, in case you haven't looked at the news lately, we're about to have a economic downturn, and that's going to have macroeconomic effects that are going to be quite broad and far-reaching for our country. So specifically, we have a trade war now with two of our biggest trading partners, Canada and China, which means the cost of goods is going to go up. Our wages are basically the same as they were in the 70s, which means people's ability to be able to pay for things like rent and food and save for retirement are going to be significantly reduced, and they already have been in the last 30 years. So what we have now is basically a perfect storm of reasons why things are about to get a lot worse before they get better. So I'm here to help you build your cash reserves and your resilience to change that is coming, whether we want to look at it or not. So thanks for being here with us today to be willing to look at this and be proactive about what we can do now. So here are the few of the many crowdfunding campaign platforms that are competing with you for your donors' attention. I talked with a person who worked at a crowdfunding platform several years ago, and he said there's over 500 plus crowdfunding platforms that exist in the world now. And so there were so many that I had no idea about until he told me that. And I started looking them up, was just like, oh my gosh, look at how many there are. I just thought Kickstarter, GoFundMe, Indiegogo, but no. There's so many more. And on top of that, newspapers like Mother Jones, which is a nonprofit, and the New York Times, which is not a nonprofit, are actually getting grants for reporting on the news. So that means there's another, again, piece of competition for us as we move forward. And on top of that, this is from Blackbaud from 2017. We are sending more emails to our base, but fewer people are opening them and fewer people are clicking through, which means that traditional methods of fundraising are not working as well as they have been. So all that said, bottom line, we have more competition, the deduction is going away, the downturn is coming, we're sending more emails with fewer results, we need to do something different, but what? My answer? Well, in normal fundraising and earned income, you're competing in an increasingly crowded market. The water is red with blood. In next level fundraising, you float above the water, and earned incomes too. You think long-term, you engage in strategic fundraising. You might have diversified fundraising strategies like earned income, which you'll have more effective fundraising. Just floating above the blue. You don't think about the sharks. You're thinking, we are different, and this is how. So no one else is competing with you. So you differentiate yourself, but you also provide a higher donor value at a lower cost. You often find new donors and people who are non-givers. So how does that look? What I'm here to say is, even though the news may be bleak, you are not powerless. And there are things that we can do no matter where we are, whether we're a very tiny startup nonprofit, or whether we're a larger chapter nonprofit, or whether we're somewhere in the middle, to help really make a good change, even now. So I'm going to give you some background about why this is going to work when you think about next level, differentiating, being more effective. So Yellowtail versus the wine companies. What happened with them? So I don't know how many people here have drunk Yellowtail wine, but you may know that it's about like a $4 or $5 bottle of wine, maybe $7, right? Whereas the big wineries in California have $100,000 bottle of wines, just like so old and so, all these special flavors inside of it. And so Yellowtail came in from Australia and they knew that they couldn't compete with these hoity-toity vintages that were so, entrenched and rarefied in their respective communities. And so what they did instead was they decided to take a wine that was very simple and fruity, and they decided to turn beer drinkers into wine drinkers and cocktail drinkers into wine drinkers with their Yellowtail brand. And so they would have people go in like the traditional Australian "G'day, mate" kind of Crocodile Dundee outfits and go into liquor stores and basically have people try their wines. And they had such a fun brand and attitude that soon they were just basically sweeping the market, and they were creating a new sort of market out of one that had not been there before for very sort of cheap wines that were fun. So that's how Yellowtail created what, a blue ocean is. Here's another one. Ringling Brothers versus Cirque du Soleil. Ringling Brothers, all these circuses are out of business now. There's a reason for that. People were like, you can't just keep doing this to animals. It's so cruel to them, and people really didn't like that. There's other issues too. How do you pay attention to things that are in three rings? It's hard. And so also people are not willing to pay a lot of money for a circus, and there's this rising costs. So what Cirque du Soleil did is they saw that there was a need, and they're like, hey, what if we took all of these people who've been training for the Olympics their whole lives as gymnasts and turn them into acrobats? So here's a job for them. And then we don't ever have to hurt animals because we're just going to create animals. And then we're going to have like a really big story happening on one place instead of three rings. And we're going to use people as animals essentially as well. So they have had some scandals in recent years about people like, dying and falling and things like that. But overall, you could say that people who do these jobs have more of a choice than the animals do in places like the Ringling Brothers. So that is their choice. So they took people who were theater goers and opera goers and turned them into Cirque du Soleil goers and charged hundreds of dollars for these tickets. And they made a whole new market that didn't exist before. So that's a couple of examples of rising up above the competition, just making a whole new thing that could really shift the way you could build earned income streams for your nonprofit. So now how does that look from a nonprofit perspective? That's where we're going next. Here's Dallas County Meals on Wheels. They had a really big problem. Their waiting list is 4 years. And they said, we need to expand by 78% to 6,700 meals delivered per day. How do we do that? So if you don't know what Meals on Wheels is, they deliver meals to housebound people. We'll talk more about them in here. So their solution was they had a leadership donor. They got 1.5 million for technology from that leadership donor. They got 1 million for food. So they found their champion. This person had delivered meals. He was a former board member and had been their supporter for 34 years. So their goal was to raise 17 million. They've raised 6 million so far. And what happened was he wanted to fund technology to serve clients more effectively. So they decided to put all 4 of these pieces of technology together. Fundly, which is their volunteer management system with an app to let staff and hospital know immediately if there's an issue with a client. All Scripts that links back to elder care and hospice care. So that's another couple of systems that go linked together. And then UPS RoadNet to deliver meals in a concentrated area using half volunteers and half paid drivers. And then PCCI to connect hospitals with real-time referrals. You need to visit the person who's in the hospital. So essentially, they're providing more wraparound care through technology. And how is this earned income? I might hear you asking. The answer is the donor insisted that Dallas County make this replicable and scalable and get a referral fee for when Fundly sells their software to other Meals on Wheels programs so they can be more sustainable. So that is how the leadership donor insisted that they do earned income on this program innovation that they were doing. So you might say to me, Mazarine, we don't have a donor that's ready to give us $2.5 million. We don't have a donor that's been, volunteering with us for 34 years. That's fine. But look at your volunteer base, people who have been volunteering with you. And then here's some other things you can take from this. Why was it successful? Because, and I asked them, they had a good proposal to a leadership donor. They had a good application to the donor's foundation. They had good reporting to the donor and foundation about progress. They had good board member with knowledge of tech who was a champion of the campaign. And they hired a major gifts fundraising person. Think about if you have a tech savvy board member. Look at your current database for your longest term, most loyal supporters, including volunteers. And then, is there a way for you to make earned income by using technology or partnering that you can provide more of a one-stop area for everything related to your cause? I'm not sure who's on the call today, but if you want me to workshop earned income streams for your cause, we can definitely pause and do that after the next few slides. So feel free to put in the chat what your cause area is, and we could brainstorm on that. So here's another one. This is Savannah Meals on Wheels. So they went from under $1 million budget to a $9.5 million budget in 15 years. You might say, Mazarine, that's not super rapid growth. And I'd say that's not the point. Rapid growth is not the point. What the point is that you grow sustainably over time. So now they've finally grown sustainably, and they're doing their first capital campaign in 57 years. So when I talked to Patty Lyons, what she said was, the more you can do, the cheaper your unit cost is, and the further your grants go. If you can get the price cheaper, you can serve more with the same amount of money. So what they did was they started buying food in greater and greater bulk, and they decided to use their excess food to do other things in the community. So her mindset underwent a shift. They realized that they could not depend on government funding, especially now with funding being reprioritized, with also United Way funding being reprioritized. And then, you know, she said, we do a lot more than just meals. We want to be the place people go to for answers, a care manager, etc. And they wanted to rebrand for the health aspect, not just convenience. Food is medicine, basically. Give people a choice. So here's an example of how to be a one-stop that isn't Meals on Wheels. It's the Livestrong Foundation. So no matter where you are in your cancer journey, whether you're a friend of someone with cancer, whether you have cancer yourself, they have a space for you in their website. So you can see here, if you go to livestrong.org, this is what their front page looks like. And they have everything that you could possibly want for support for your cancer journey. So whether you want to fundraise for them, it says join the fight there on the left top. If you want to do, if you have cancer and you want support, there it is next to it. If you want to learn more about their programs, it's right there. And then they also have a shop. So they have a lot of different things you can buy to either support the cause or support you on your cancer journey. And they have peer support for people who have cancer, with other people with cancer, to talk to them about the problem, someone who can really understand your problems. So they just have a host of resources for people, and they've made themselves a one-stop. So that's really, really good. Yeah, so everybody feel free to put your cause area or your mission, you know, into the chat box. Like, who do you focus on? Who do you help? I'd love to hear who that is, and we can talk about how you could be a one-stop, for example. So while you're doing that, I'm just gonna go a little further here. So the Meals on Wheels lesson was rebrand as the place of first choice, not the place of last resort. And they wanted to ask themselves, how can we continuously improve? How do we do it bigger and better? And who else needs what we have? So they found out they could cater businesses in town, United Way, homeless shelters, mental health, daily rehab facilities, and, you know, basically use their kitchen, their resources they can control 24 hours a day. And that's what they did. So this is a United Way catered lunch that they catered. You want to ask who else is providing the service we offer. You want to do your market research, essentially, and say, do we have an asset that we could be using more effectively? So everybody here, maybe Abby, does anybody here put in what their cause area is in the chat?
Yeah, and we've got some really interesting ones. So one of the first one that came through is, I am absolutely going to butcher this, Alenkrita. They're from Boston Harbor Now. They are a civic nonprofit, quote, focused on maximizing the benefits of Boston's harbor, waterfront, and islands. They're also a legislative partner of the Boston Harbor Islands National and State Park, which is really cool. And then they currently manage the food and ferry contracts. So that gives them some earned revenue, and they're looking to increase that revenue through different streams.
That's really good. Yeah, I'm actually from Boston, so it's really interesting. There's a lot of things you can do there, right? So you could work with the tourism board in Boston, or you could work with, I mean, we have a thing called Portland Monthly here in Portland. If there's a Boston Monthly kind of thing where it's like all about tourism to Boston, you could really pump up the economic life of the city through a better partnership with these different agencies, or these different sort of like, sort of governmental, quasi-governmental agencies that work in hand with, Department of Tourism at the Boston Mayor's office or something like that. This is a really good opportunity for you to think about, okay, I've been on the Boston ferries. Like, they're okay. There are better ferries that I have been on, though. So how could you increase the quality of the food that you offer without increasing the cost? Like, how could you make it more of a luxury experience if that's what you wanted to do? Or how could you get more people thinking about taking the ferry? What would be some ways to make these islands more enticing? Do you want to have more partnerships with kayaking nonprofits, for example, or paddleboarding nonprofits, or I don't know, rowing organizations, like something that would be helping people utilize the harbor more effectively, and then maybe charging a fee or working with them to like have a piece of some sort of income that they have from that particular income stream where they have tourist groups that go out and do that. Maybe you could be advertising inside the New England Aquarium, about your different tours that you take if you don't already do that. Maybe you could be thinking about if you're going to be the one stop for the harbor and fund tourism activities, or maybe environmental protection of the harbor. If you're a legislative piece and you're doing advocacy work, which means that you might, also focus on harbor cleanup, which of course we know is an endless job in the Boston Harbor. Working more with companies who want to have a better reputation. That's a great earned income stream, a cause marketing stream for you, to think about, like, how could they clean up their own image by helping clean up the harbor. And maybe you could offer them some employee sort of like team building activities through kayaking on the harbor, helping people care more about the harbor through being directly on it. Not necessarily having to go in it, because that could be oily and gross, but you know what I mean? Like, so that's some ideas for you. There's a lot of things you could be doing because that's such a big area and you have so many people who care in different ways about the harbor. So I would definitely survey the people that are already your donors and see what do they truly care about, and maybe that could give you more of a focus for the next 6 to 12 months.
Those are some fantastic ideas.
Thank you.
Do you want to do another one, or do we want to move on with the slides?
God, I want to do more, but I also feel like we have so little time. So everybody, let's just do one more. Can you pick one more?
Yeah, for sure. This one I feel like we'll have some interesting answers. So Tricia said that her organization works with at-risk youth, and they offer their members the opportunity to get paid while they're getting their GED or certification and construction skills on a job site. So members get education that they can use post programs. They are put in paid internships and career placements. So it's the Youth Conservation Corps, and it sounds like there's some really cool stuff going on over there.
Okay. Yeah, so here is where I would advocate for you, Tricia, reading Win-Win for the Greater Good book, because it talks a lot about cross-sector partnerships. And actually, I would also say the same for the Boston Harbor people. That will be useful to you because there is actually government money that they want to give out specifically for encouraging people in the trades, in construction, in conservation careers. And they are looking for people to give this money to. It's grants, sometimes it's contracts for training, for vocational training. So that's something to consider, that a lot of nonprofits don't necessarily think about straight away in terms of earned income, but government contracting is absolutely earned income. It absolutely is. They're paying you to do the thing you're already doing. So I would do that.
What's the name of that book again?
Yeah, it's called Win-Win for the Greater Good.
Win-Win for the Greater Good.
Yeah, and I'll put that in the chat so that you can copy it.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody, I'll send you a link to this in just a second.
Yeah. And I interviewed this guy on my website, and he's spoken for me before. He's really good. So anyway, that's his book. And he has like 10 misconceptions that we have about, corporations and government, and 10 misconceptions they tend to have about us as nonprofits. So, oh man, we have to keep going. I didn't realize it was that late. Okay. So to get yourself ready to do earned income streams, or to do them better, or to expand your thinking about what is possible for your organization, think about your SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I'm going to go into each one of these in detail, but I'd like you to take your piece of paper now, if you haven't already done this, and draw a little line down the middle and then a line down the other middle of it, and then put this on your paper, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we'll go into how you can fill that out in the next few slides. So how do you write your strengths? So what do we do better or differently than other comparable programs? What do we do that is distinctive? That is your strength. And I took a lot of these questions from Fundraising the Smart Way, which is another excellent book that I will be mentioning again later. For your weaknesses, for your W piece, ask yourself, are we slow or sloppy or leaving gaps in donor care or client care? Could we partner better with other agencies? And that's kind of what I'm trying to talk about today a little bit here too, is expand your vision of partnerships, as you can see. Does our fundraising team or our board understand how to promote our programs and services with a budget? Do we have a budget for our fundraising program? E, opportunities, external opportunities, ask yourself, right? Or O, are there growth opportunities for us in other places or markets? And I'm saying, yes, there absolutely are. Are there opportunities to partner or collaborate with other agencies for fundraising? And that's what I'm trying to share with you. And then your T part, your threats. Have other nonprofits launch services or programs or marketing as attractive to our donors? And then, as we said in the beginning, and I talked about those threats, are there global or macroeconomic forces that work that could compromise our growth or drive up our operating costs? So I think the answer to that is yes and yes. So cut out what's not working, right? Before you start doing a new thing, ask yourself, what should we be cutting out? Do we have lower diminishing returns for Giving Tuesday, our year-end appeal, our spring appeal, our fundraising events, our crowdfunding, our telemarketing, our grants, or our TV newspaper advertising? If we have lower diminishing returns for any of these, what should we be cutting out? This is a wonderful event I went to a couple years ago at this church, and it was beautiful. A friend of mine asked me to go, and I was like, this is a wonderful event. And how much did it cost to put on? Is this really, like a fundraising win for you? If not with their earned income, what could be better? So determine your needs. What do you need money for? What is a new program you could try? How can you become a one-stop for those that you serve or your donors? And so you're hearing me kind of reiterating that as I talk about people's problems here. How could you leverage a current program and make it more enticing to volunteers or donors? So, for example, a nonprofit here in Portland called the Central City Concern, they're a homelessness nonprofit. They needed bedbug-free beds, and so they made them. And so the reason that bedbugs can't live in this bed is because it's full of little mesh pieces that the bedbugs just have nowhere to go. So they made bedbug-free beds and bedbug-free side tables, and they sold it to other homelessness nonprofits. So if you go to centralcitybed.org, you should be able to see that. And so instead of thinking about how can we sell a thing to the entire world, which is really broad, you could be thinking about how could we see a need that other nonprofits like us have and sell them a thing that they need? Because this nonprofit's obviously not the only nonprofit that had a problem with bed bugs. So that maybe a domestic violence shelter could also use this. Maybe another kind of shelter could use this. So that's something to think about. This is a needs example that they saw and they marketed successfully and they sold successfully. So there you go. That's another way to think about this. It's not just about your donors. It's not just about, selling someone a thing that's not really related to your mission. It's actually looking at your mission, seeing what do we need? Should we make it? Should we try to sell to other people like us? Think about it. Once you make a program that has a better nonprofit for-profit partnership or government partnership in Boston Harbor, could you help other nonprofits like you in New York, in DC, in other coastal cities replicate your success? That's something to think about. Look at your market. What makes you unique? This is something else I was just saying. Who is similar to you regionally or nationally? So what are they doing? That can often just spark so many ideas in you, you won't even know. So when we talk about next level, it's not just a marketing strategy. It's not just a cost-cutting strategy. And it doesn't mean you have to add new programs. It's not just a SWOT. You want to think about differentiating yourself overall. So look at how other nonprofits and try to just make a tiny donation to them How do they treat their donors? How often do they communicate? What are their volunteer offerings? How do they advertise? Is there a degree of automation they have in their donor communications? How much appreciation do they do for donors and volunteers? What are their programs? How slick is their design, or how good is their design, I should say? And then do they have a monthly giving program or a major donor program? And then rate them on all of these things. You can say, okay, great, I think they're like a 10 with treating their donors well, but they're like a 5 with, how often they communicate. Like I didn't really get much more from them after my first donation. How do they advertise? Like, oh, I see that they, do this or that, but their automation really doesn't make me feel good. Like they say, dear friend or whatever. Do they have a monthly giving program? Yes. Major donor program? Not really. And then after you look at this, you could say, how do we compare on every single one of these things? So how do we treat our donors? How often do we communicate? What are the quality of our volunteer offerings? How do we advertise? What is the degree of automation in our communications? How much appreciation do we show for our donors and volunteers? What are our programs? Could our design be better? Do we have an attractive monthly giving program or a major donor program? And so this is something you can come together with other people on your team and look at. So if you're the executive director, come together with your development person and your volunteer coordinator and say, okay, what are we doing? Your communications person should be there too if you have one. And then with all 4 of you in the room, you should be able to start to brainstorm other ways that your organization could be doing it better. Instead of you just being top down, do this, you could say, like, let's collaborate in this decision making. Let's look at what other people are doing and say, hey, could we try that? Is that working for them? Could we call them and ask how it's working for them? Why don't we just have more of a collaborative peer-to-peer learning network? So then ask yourself these questions when you're sitting there together. Could we make a better offering for volunteers, for monthly giving, for major gifts, for earned income, for events, for programs, or something else? So this is Red Nose Day here on the right. You can see that even Shakespeare has a red nose on her shirt. And it was a nonprofit that got started fairly recently that basically just took off from the moment it started, because it's all about laughing and it's about helping people through laughter. And they had a really iconic image of a red nose. And so they made cupcakes about it. They made t-shirts about it. They have like things you can wear, and it becomes this whole brand. And that started to just become a money machine that would help people feel connected to causes and have fun and laugh at the same time. So here's the hurdles you're going to have to overcome. One is a cognitive hurdle. The organization is mired in status quo, but we've always done things this way. Or maybe you have a resource hurdle, limited staff time and resources. What could we automate to free up staff time? Things we could stop doing, because ultimately your ability to have more money is going to depend on you also stopping the things that are not making you very much money. It's not just about you doing more. It's about you doing less and focusing on the things that make you the most money. So political hurdle is an opposition from the board. Like, this is not where we want to take this nonprofit. Or maybe your staff are not motivated. Making an earned income stream is hard. Can't we just get more grants? Yes, you can get more grants, absolutely. But if we're going into a downturn, we saw last time this happened in 2008 and 9, that grants that they said for sure that you're going to get will often have, now they're like, oh no, we're going to refocus our priority areas because this is more urgent to us now. So even if you have a grantor that's been there for you consistently, it's hard. So is anybody here anticipating any other hurdles from their staff or board or leadership that they would like to share right now? Because I'm trying to like cover some of these bases, but are you hearing in your head what they're going to say? Could you put that in the chat? And maybe Abby, could you tell me about what they're saying?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. So one thing that just occurred to me while we're waiting for people to respond to this, is something like Amazon Smile considered earned income?
Sure, it is. That's an easy thing to set up.
Very cool. I know my Amazon windows all fuss at me now when I open Amazon, but I don't go to Amazon Smile.
Yeah, I've never used Amazon Smile, but I am getting more into Amazon these days. And if people can't think of a hurdle right now, that's okay. We're going to keep going because I do want to make sure we have time for questions at the end as well. But basically,
Perfect.
yeah, if you can't think of a specific hurdle in your mind right now, people will be resistant to change, and we're going to give you the tools in this webinar today to help you overcome these hurdles. So,
And I'm sure that's really special. I know one thing I hear a lot from our nonprofits is that boards in particular struggle with making big changes, especially if you are proposing starting something new.
yeah.
So that I'm interested to see what tools you have for that.
Yes, yes, and there's actually an exercise I'm going to teach everybody at the end of the presentation today that will help. So, but here are a couple of the books that I would recommend, three of them actually, that can help you start to make these changes. And I'd suggest having a business book once a month, or take one of these and discuss it. You know, you could try the Blue Ocean Strategy, you could try Fundraising the Smart Way by Ellen Bristol, which I'm holding here in this picture, or Win-Win for the Greater Good by Bruce Birch, or Failing Forward by John Maxwell, and he's a very famous leadership thinker. So when you have these brainstorm sessions on the reg, it allows you to sort of just start expanding out of sort of like, okay, I have to focus on what's in front of me, or I have to focus on, you know, the urgency of this or that event that we promised to do that it really isn't making much money, into like the broader, more expansive view from the top, saying why are we really doing this? And what could we be doing better? And, you know, how could we be shifting misconceptions people have about us? Because even our long-term donors have misconceptions about us, to a stronger position in our cause area or in our market. So create systems. That's a wonderful way to replicate your successes and avoid the mistakes. So think about what your donor cultivation cycle is. What happens when they first give? What happens 2 weeks after they give? What happens in a year? Do you follow up with them? What's your subscriber cultivation cycle? Do you have a series of emails that you give people when they first sign up for your newsletter that can help them become a better volunteer, or, you know, find out other ways to engage with you, like coming to your events? What's your major donor cultivation cycle? When someone gives you a $500 donation, do you think that, like, okay, that's it? Like, I don't want to bug them anymore because they just gave us so much money? Or are you actually working on having a meeting with them, talking about their priorities and seeing if there's a fit between who they are and what your ideal major donor is? And then what are your goals and deadlines around major donors or getting more donors in general? And then who's responsible for that? And then how can you eliminate barriers? So oftentimes barriers are just like, we've got too much to do. So how do we prioritize all the different tasks on our plates? So here's some myths about next level earned income and fundraising. It's all about being donor centric. No, it's about creating new donors out of non-donors. So we already talked about that. Another misconception is that you have to make new programs. Not necessarily. Maybe you just have new volunteer opportunities. Maybe you have new packaging of what you already have. Maybe you have new ways to get involved. Maybe you're just not explaining well what you do, and so you need a new tagline, or you need to reframe what you're doing in other ways. Maybe you have, like Central City Concern, new product options to new markets. There's lots of things that you could do, including selling training, which if you want to learn more about that, I would recommend The Non-Nonprofit by Steve Rothschild. It's a really good start to figure out how to sell training, how to take your replicable programs and sell them and license or franchise to other similar nonprofits. And that's what funders like to see. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. The Global Autism Project had an existing edutourism program, but it was small, badly marketed, and poorly funded. And they created an autism therapist test prep program, marketed on Facebook, and used that pool to draw more into their edutourism program, expand it, and, oh, by the way, help a lot more people with autism all around the world. So this is a picture of that. Oh, bummer, sorry. There we go. So this is Global Autism Project. When I met their founder, Molly, she was making $35,000 a year and sleeping on her friend's couch. And now they are over $500,000, and they have staff, they have an office in New York City, and they have basically helped tons of autism therapists become better therapists through learning more about cultural competency in places like Indonesia, in different parts of South America, in different parts of Africa. They've really, and they've also been to India too. They've got tons and tons of, they're helping communities basically get educated about autism, and they're saving lives. And you may think I'm being overly dramatic, but I'm not, because before they came, they would hear about stories of people beating their children, leaving them in the yard, and killing them because they had autism. Just communities just not knowing um, how to deal with this person that doesn't seem to fit into their worldview, and desperate people make desperate choices. So they are really saving lives all over the world by helping communities understand autism better. And on top of that, they're helping people who come from the US have a visual experience of their mission, and making lifelong donors, as well as making major donors, because it does cost quite a bit to go on one of these trips. But they brought them in with a pipeline technique of creating Facebook ads that allowed them to then offer something that would help people pass their what's called their BCBA exam, and then worked completely with people after that to say, hey, if you want to do even more, now that you trust us, come with us on this big event. So they're working with schools now, they've got an incredible pipeline, and they're just soaring. And they did it all because they were very innovative when it came to thinking about how to be more entrepreneurial and how to think about next level earned income streams. And it's really paid off for them. So do you have to have new technologies? No, but I happen to know that they use Ontraport, and that's what I use as well. And it gets them new donor onboarding strategies. It can get them new subscriber onboarding emails, but you can also do this with MailChimp. You can get reminder emails from when monthly giver credit cards bounce through Ontraport, which is pretty neat. And then they also do postcards and SMS messages too. So that's just a whole other level. Do you have to be the first mover in a space? No. Competition just proves the market, basically. So you don't have to be the first one to think of something. And is it a differentiation strategy? No, because you can raise and create new things, but you can also look what you need to eliminate and reduce to drive down your costs. So is it the same as innovation? No, it's about value innovation for stakeholders and volunteers and donors. So think about, is there a way to use volunteers that will help you serve your cause more effectively? Is there a way to satisfy more stakeholders with more about providing less effort? So here's a research project for your intern or someone in your office. You can also use fancyhands.com. They charge like $25 for like 5 tasks at 5 minutes long. So ask them, who else is active in our space, locally, regionally, nationally, internationally, and then how do we offer something different, or how do we compare? Ask them to just go in and say, look, on all these different things that we just mentioned, how do we compare? So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to ask these questions. What can we raise, create, reduce, and eliminate? So example of eliminating and reduce. For example, how can we reduce fundraising turnover? How can we eliminate the time it takes to get a response and thank you from a donation? And how can we create more donor value for a lower cost? So those are some things to think about, because we lose on average $50,000 every time we lose a fundraiser. And if we have turnover for like 3 years running, we're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, not just in the cost it takes to recruit a new person, but building donor relationships again, and all the downtime between when you have people. It's really quite incredible how much money you lose when you lose a good fundraiser. So also you're losing donors because maybe it's taking too long because your fundraiser is overwhelmed. As you can see here on the right, this woman is so overwhelmed. You know, how long does it go between getting a donation to getting a thank you note? And then how do you follow up? How do you support this person to follow up with technology? And then how do you create more donor value for a lower cost? So what barriers do we anticipate? Are there cognitive, political, staff motivation, resource barriers? And how can we overcome this? So now I'm going to teach you what I promised you, which is the 6 thinking hats exercise. So for political or staff barriers, consider Edward de Bono's 6 thinking hats. And I'm going to explain to you what each one of these is, but I picked some fun hats here. And so maybe go to Goodwill or another cheap place and find some funny hats for people to wear. It could be fun just to like play with this. As you can see, they don't have to be expensive hats, but one has to be black, one has to be yellow, one has to be blue, one has to be red, one has to be green, one has to be white. So the black hat is judgmental, warning of difficulties. I bet you can think of a person in your office who's always doing that. Then there's the yellow hat, optimistic, talking about value and benefits. That's the hat I like to wear a lot. Then there's the white hat that calls for information and it's emotionally neutral. Then there's the red hat, who articulates emotions and feelings and hunches. And then there's the green hat, encouraging creative thinking, focusing on new ideas. That's kind of what we're doing here today. We're all wearing the green hat right now. And the blue hat is the process-based thinking worn by the facilitator. So to reduce these barriers, have everybody sit down and say, we're all gonna wear one hat. Everyone's gonna wear the white hat right now. What data do we have to support this idea? What info do we need before we move forward? If we're going to do a new earned income stream or try to be a one-stop, how do we support this process? Is there a reason to do this now? Next, everybody wears the yellow hat. So what are the benefits of this idea? What are some positive things that this could bring us? And so on. Then everybody wears the black hat. Say, what are the weaknesses of this idea? Why do we think this is never going to work and we shouldn't even try? Like, just get it all out there on the table. You know, be as depressing as you want because you've already went through the other hats. Then, you know, everyone wears the green hat. Said, okay, now we've like talked about all of our concerns about this. How can we improve this idea based on that? How can we make it more practical? How can we package it? We're just being creative here. And that's what we're talking about today. How can we repackage what you're doing? How can we make what you're doing into an earned income stream? How can we improve our current offerings for volunteers, for donors, for even for staff to help them stay? And then everyone wears the red hat. What are our emotions around this? You can start with this hat if it's a controversial issue, just to get everyone's feelings in the open. And it might be we have to reduce programs, we have to reduce staff. This is a very emotional topic. And then everyone wears the blue hat. What are the next steps? So if you want more about this, check out this Six Thinking Hats book. But I've given you the rundown right here, and you could probably run with this. You could just look it up on Google as well. So here's the next poll question for you. What action will you take from today? And if Abby, you could run this poll question for me. Think about how we can raise, create, reduce, and eliminate. Do research on what other people offer. Do a SWOT. Try the Six Thinking Hats or something else. Or you could, I don't know if it's possible with the poll, if you could say all of them, but feel free, if this is something else, feel free to put in the chat pane what the something else is. What action do you want to take?
Yeah, I would love to know what the something else is.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me to think about doing a SWOT and things like that, and kind of the competitive research, because that's something I've seen happen so much in a for-profit system. And with a lot of the nonprofits with whom I've spoken or I've even volunteered with, the kind of moving toward that for-profit thinking is really a struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, we all want to sustain our missions and we all want to do the best we can. But it's just hard to shift our mindsets. And also when we're not getting paid the way for-profit people are, we're like, what's the benefit of me innovating, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it looks like answers coming in have kind of slowed, and it looks like well over half the people, about half people, are really going to be focusing on what they can create, raise, reduce, and eliminate. And the next most popular one was doing research on what other people are offering.
That's wonderful.
So those are the two big ones.
I love that. Thanks everybody for sharing where you are with that right now. If you do want more resources around this, I have a fundraising planning course that can help you start to plan for next year. We have 8 weeks left in this year. This is the perfect time to plan. If you go to wildwomanfundraising.com/shop, you can find it. I also have a ton of other courses on finding new donors, keeping new donors, sponsorships right here, your ultimate guide to a bigger sponsorship. I don't know about you, but that cookie is making me hungry. Appeal letters, e-newsletters, fundraising with volunteers, and more. So I've written tons of courses to help you. If you go to my website, wildwomanfundraising.com/shop, you can see it. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming. We're going to take questions now. If you have any questions further for me about how to apply this to your nonprofit, I'm right here. Let me know what you're working on. So my email is mazarine@wildwomanfundraising.com, and my phone number is 503-673-3863. And yeah, that's my website, wildwomanfundraising.com. You can see it presented for a ton of people and helped a lot of people. I'd love to help you too. So are there any questions right now about how we could apply this to your cause? Abby, has anything come in that we should workshop or talk about?
Well, I did have one just kind of observation that actually came from our friend over at the Boston Harbor group. They mentioned that being in a public-private partnership where the public and the private have a lot of crossover, has thrown up some of its own challenges along with a lot of the pros. So do you have any rules for organizations that are kind of treading that public-private line?
That's a good question. Depending on how you were set up, and it sounds like you were set up as a C4, not just as a C3, because C4s can do advocacy. You have different challenges. And I'm sure there's a few books on public-private partnerships that you should definitely check out. I'm not sure what exact challenges you're having, maybe in terms of like decision making or stakeholder alignment. It's hard to know what to say if I don't know what you're facing.
True. She is a 501c3,
Okay.
but what I can do is make sure you guys get each other's contact information in case you do want to kind of flesh out a couple of things.
Sure.
And then one thing I was just going to throw out, one cool thing that I've seen one of our clients doing. We have a local nonprofit who is a local SPCA, and one issue that they were having is that some of their dogs were staying in the shelter for too long. And we just watched them launch a new program where you can rent a dog, and you can rent a dog. You don't have to make a donation, but you can. So there's a little bit of income coming through there. But then renting a dog has helped introduce dogs that needed adopting to people who maybe weren't necessarily thinking about adopting a dog or wanted to try it out a little bit before they actually made that decision. And so their dogs are being adopted. They're earning a little extra income. And then they get the benefit of having some of their dogs get to be out and about, which is really cool. So that's another fun example.
I love that.
Oh my God, it's adorable. People post pictures of their dates, and it's too much. Here's a question that came in from Laura Caldwell. She said that some in her organization are concerned about the earned part of earned income and what that means for being a tax-exempt 501c3. So do you have an answer to some of those fears? And if you do or don't, do you have a resource that Laura could use to kind of guide her through what the earned word means for the 501c3 tax issues?
Sure. So Laura, we're all in different states here. I know that Abby, you're calling in from Florida. I'm in Portland. There are different laws governing nonprofits in each state. So the person that I would recommend looking at for laws around earned income for your state is a guy named Tony Martinetti, who is in New York City, and he's a lawyer who specializes in tax laws for nonprofits. And so I'm going to type his name here into the chat pane, and you can Google him. And earned income and tax exempt status. Because yeah, that's something that it would be impossible for me to keep up on for each state, and everybody has different rules. So in Portland, for example, in Oregon, we can do tons and tons of raffles and don't have to announce them to anyone. We can just make them up on the spot and make tons of money with it. But my mom, who had a little flower club on the South Shore of Boston, they had maybe a budget every year of $5,000 total, just all volunteer nonprofit. They did a raffle and maybe made $200 from it, and they got slapped on the wrist by the Massachusetts State Secretary of State's office saying that was illegal gambling, you shouldn't do that. So
No.
yeah, yes,
That's
they did
terrible.
that. It is. They're like, you watch out, you're going to lose your status. And they're just like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And I was like, yeah, but you have to check the laws in your state. Like every state's different, and that's just where Massachusetts is on that. And this is where Portland is. This is much more Wild West out here where people can just, do what they want. So yeah, I would definitely check your, with Tony and with your local Secretary of State's office about earned income streams, because that will give you more of an idea of what is possible. And sometimes there's like a percentage that you can have from earned income versus not that you might want to look into. It just really depends.
Cool. And you guys, just for your edification, I just Googled his name and a couple of options came up. There's a nonprofit law blog around earned income and a couple of podcasts. So if you Google his name, you might find something that's useful for you. Yeah. It looks like those are some of the biggest questions. And yeah, I mean, those were two big ones that came up, the tax implications for being a 501c3 and then the dealing with the obstacles of crossing over the public and then private relationships. So those were huge. If you had someone on this call who is interested in starting to explore this with their board, would you recommend that a board get involved with the kind of SWOT or working through the thinking hats, or is that something you think staff should kind of develop and hone a little bit before they present it to the board?
That's a really good question. And I'm just going to tell you this, that based on my research and the research of other people, when you involve your board in strategic planning or fundraising planning, you will have much more likelihood of getting your decisions approved than if you just hit them with, okay, we made this thing, now we're going to go do it, and we're expecting your support on it. So it's really important for you to make everybody feel who is a decision maker in your organization, like a board, even if it's not their job, that they're being included on these things. So absolutely. Include your board in fundraising planning, include your board in strategic planning, include them in your idea, generation group for earned income streams. Maybe you just want to rent out your conference room or your event space. Maybe you just want to maybe do a cafe press store with your logo and stuff on it. Like there's a very tiny nonprofit here in Oregon called Cat Adoption Team, and there's CAT. And they have a cafe press store, which just basically takes very little effort to produce. So it can be as little commitment as that to as big a commitment as let's have a social enterprise coffee shop, or maybe those margins are too narrow for that. You look into that and you're like, no, let's go to SCORE and see what, social enterprise we could do that would have a bigger margin. And when I say margin, I mean how much money could you make with it compared to the money that you'd be putting into it. And the other thing you want to think about is what makes sense from a program perspective, from a mission perspective, when you look at earned income streams. And for Goodwill, their entire thing is getting people jobs. And so having people be able to have a job in their store, have very low barrier to entry, giving them job training skills, for them to have stores makes sense. For someone like your Boston Harbor nonprofit, probably not, but there's other things you can do. When I worked at the Urban League, we had a career fair where we had over 1,000 people come in and go through the different employers that were there and help them find a higher quality of person, as well as help our mission, which was to help African American people with empowerment in their careers and in civic engagement and so on. So for us, that was a good earned income stream that was also made sense from a mission perspective, because everyone, the vendors and the sponsors, paid to be there. So we made a little money on that.
That's really neat. When you and I first talked about earned income streams, I didn't understand quite the breadth of options available to nonprofits who are looking to boost their earned income. And you've absolutely given us a ton of food for thought. Thank you so much for bringing all these ideas. You've thrown out everything from social enterprise to little things like cafe press shop, and there's just so much great information and so many ideas that you've thrown out here. It's been fantastic listening to it.
Thank you. Well, thanks everybody for coming. And if you have any other questions, I'm here. Thank you for having me,
Perfect.
Abby.
Absolutely. And everybody, just for your information, I am going to be sending you an email in the next couple of days that will include a link to this webinar. I'll include links to Mazarine's page and a few of the other resources she's mentioned. I'll also make sure to include her contact information. So if you have any questions that we weren't able to cover, or if you wanted to talk to her more about how your particular nonprofit can start looking into some of these strategies, you'll have that ready for you. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been fantastic. I hope you have a really great rest of the week. And Mazarine, I'll talk to you soon. Everybody else, you'll get an email from me soon.
Excellent, everybody. Thanks a lot. Bye.
All right, bye.